Okay, we're in Genesis chapter 3, and we're looking at Eve looking at the tree. And we're studying, just a quick review from last week, we're studying the trouble with your eyes. And of course, that's the first sensation you have concerning things good, concerning things evil.
So, ang atong nisgutan si Iba, nga katong nagsigisig tanaw sa kahoy, pagkahuman ang atong mahibawan gidani kanigyon atong mga mata. Kung doon natin makitaan, makakosya og lahi nga gibati, sensation. So,
if you're sleeping, then the first sensation may be your ears or somebody touch you. But if you're awake, probably you see something.
Kung matulog mo, kasagaran yung mabatian, tingali sa pinagi sa inyong dalunggan, or kung hikapon mo. Pero kung nagmata mo, kasagaran ang makahatag ninyong gibati, maugod na ang mata kung sa inyong nangakitaan.
So look at the screen and see this verse here, 2 Peter 2:14, having eyes full of adultery, and that cannot cease from sin. Wow, what are your eyes full of? What do you want your eyes to be full of?
Unsay inyong gamitag tan-aw sa inyong mga mata nga nalingaw mo o napuno na gyud og gasigi mo og tan-aw ana?
When you look at a crowd of people, do you see girls or do you see sinners?
Kung magtanaw mo sa kadaghanan, pinabag-an nga mga tao, unsa inyong nakitaan, babae o nakakita ba mo og makasasala?
Okay, in Mark chapter 7 verse 21, for from within, out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, drugs, alcohol, all of this stuff comes from your heart. Evil, wicked imaginations.
Kaning tanan gikan sa inyong mga kasing-kasing kanang atong gipangbasa diha, mao nay nakahatag og mga dautan nga mga paghuna-huna.
Thefts and covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. You got to watch your eyes. The Bible says your eye affecteth your heart.
So kinahalan, bantayan nato atong mga mata, kay atong mata makaapektar sa ato ang kasing-kasing.
Verse 23, all these evil things come from within and defile the man. Proverbs mentions evil eye twice more. You shall be as gods, the devil said, knowing good and evil. And that part of it was true.
So kinahanglan nga atong bantayan gyud ang atong mga mata kay gikan sa kahiladman kaning mga dautan nga mga huna-huna uban pa diha.
Satan neglected to mention the guilt that's associated with knowing good and evil.
Si taning nakalimot og istorya nga kung makabalo mo og maayo sa dautan naay gasunod nga guilt o kanang konsensya.
Satan forgot to mention the psychiatric wards filled with insane people just from the guilt of their sins. Wow.
Nakalimot sa istorya si taning nga kanang sa mga sa mga nagkabongbuang na nga tao, psycho people, mao na nga gumikan kana sa mga konsensya na nahitabo.
Satan conveniently left out the wars caused by pride, self-righteousness, covetousness, covetous judgments, because of the knowledge of good and evil. Sounds good, but the trouble that comes with it is a problem.
So daghan gyapon gituyog kalimutan, gilimtan ni taning pagistorya kanang mga butang nga kanang pagkamaayo, covetousness, judgment, kana sada na paminawon pero ang resulta na dili gyud maayo.
Now, with that knowledge comes a responsibility, and we're studying right this second the age of accountability.
So ang sunod na dunay responsibilidad nga pagpili sa maayo. Kaya akong isgutan karon mao ang panahon o edad sa accountability.
Now, I want you to think just a minute. Does a 1-year-old know that it's wrong to lie?
Kasagaran, ang mga nag-edad og isa pa ka tuig at maka-prone kanang murag slag.
The answer is no. What about a 2-year-old? They're beginning to learn.
Kanang 2 anyos, magkahuna na, magsugod na o kahibalo.
What about a 3-year-old that's been caught lying and they receive discipline for that?
So kana kunong 3 anyos, unya na sakpan nga namakak, unya gipanisan na sila na.
It's beginning to dawn on them. They're seeing that if they're caught, it doesn't pay to lie.
So dunay istorya nga kung madakpan ka, dili giday maayo nga mamakak.
Now, there's a difference between knowing good and evil and knowing right and wrong.
So naay diferensya ang pagkabalo sa matarong og insakto ay matarong og dili kaysa yawa og kamayo.
And I want you to know this and understand it because it's not taught by a lot of churches.
So gusto na ko nga mahibaw-an ninyo kay wala kay ni gitudlo sa mga kasimbahanan.
Your mother and father can teach you the difference between right and wrong, and it has no connection to God whatsoever.
Ang inyong mga ginikanan makatudlo kaninyo ug unsay diferensya sa insakto og sayop. Og dili wala nay koneksyon sa Ginoo.
Right and wrong, you can learn that in connection with the law, with the policeman, with the judge, with your mom, your dad. But look at the verse on the screen there, Deuteronomy 1:39. Moreover, your little ones, which ye said should be a prey, and your children, which in that day, watch it, had no knowledge between good and evil. They shall go in thither, and unto them will I give it, and they shall possess it. Now, go ahead. Well, you don't need to quote the verse. He's talking about the children that did not know good and evil. Okay, think of it. Think now, try to figure this out. What age does a child know the difference between good and evil? In other words, he knows then that he has done something against God, not just a policeman or mom and dad.
So unsa kunoy edad sa bata nga makabalo sa maayo og dautan. Lahi sa insakto og sayop. Ang insakto og sayop sa mga balaod na, sa mga pulis-pulis na, dili ra man asroa. Ang kana gyung lapil ang Ginoo, maayo og dautan. Kano sa daw makabalo og bata? Pila edad?
Suppose a child is raised in the home of two atheists, and I'm sure this happens all the time. They can know that it's wrong to lie to mommy, and they can be punished for it without them having any knowledge of God or good and evil.
Kasagaran sa mga bata, 2 anyos ta mag-8 anyos, nga kabalo, nga sayop, mamakak. Pero, naay tsansa nga dili sa kabalo unsa nang maayo og dautan. Nilalang nahibawan, nga sayop, mamakak, o pwede sila panisan sa ilang ginikanan.
Okay, in the room right here, I want you to raise your hand if you were saved below 10 years of age. You were younger than 10. Okay, Mia. Anybody else? Okay, Mia. Now that you're 14, a grown woman, can you remember enough about being saved that you really understood your responsibility to God in knowing good and evil? Yeah. What age were you? 7? Okay. Can you repeat all that, sir?
Mia! Pila edad nimo nga luwas ka o karon nga tigulang na ka? Grown woman na gud, tiguang na. Tigulang na ka nga babae.
So here's a young girl of 7. Careful now, be very careful. Think about this. A young girl of 7 raised in a Christian home. She's in a good church. She's got a good Sunday school teacher. So she fully understands that there is a God, and that when you do something wrong or evil, that you're responsible to God for your actions.
So ni ay 7 anyos nga babae nga nakabalo. Kabalo siya gyud tanan, nasabtan gyud niya unsay sayop o tarong o unsay maayo og dautan.
Now there's a lot of factors involved here. Now, who led you to the Lord, Mia? Jessa. Okay. All right, now look. I don't know what the rest of you, we don't have time for individual testimonies, but some of you may not have been raised in a Christian home. Some of you may not have had a good church with a good Sunday school teacher. Some of you may, it's possible you never saw a Bible, you never heard of Jesus Christ. That's there's different things that play a part in this. Go ahead.
So tingali kadaghanan sa inyo dire wala makabalo, wala maluwas og sayo, wala mo na kasimbahan og tsada, wala mo na ka Sunday school teacher og gwapo, wala sad mo na ka na matuto kahin sa kasimbahanan.
Now, I was raised in a good Christian home, and my mother was an excellent teacher of children. My mother tells me that I was saved when I was 7, that I said I was saved, that I prayed, did all the stuff I was supposed to do. I simply don't remember that. I wish I could remember that I had been saved at 7. I simply don't remember. I don't know.
Ang akong inahan, paayo kayo mo tudlo og Sunday school sa mga bata. Og iya kong giingnan nga naluwas ta ko sa edad nga 7 anyos. Pero wala gid ko'y mahinumduman So, ingon siya, naluwas ko 7 anyos pero hanggang hinaot unta ko nga kahinumdum unta ko ana.
I do remember getting saved when I was 18, and I felt in need of salvation. I knew, of course, who God was and what sin was, and I did the things necessary. That's when I date my salvation. You have to be so very careful with children, because if they like you, then they want to please you. They want to make you happy. So if you say you need to pray or whatever, they're going to do that because they like you. The other thing is true also. If they're afraid of you, then maybe they're just going to pray to get rid of you or to get you to leave them alone.
So akong nahinumduman nga luwas jud ko 18 anyos. Motong dito na ako gihalad akong pinabuhi sa Ginoo. Pero kinahanglan ning magbantay mo sa mga bata. Kay tingali ang mga bata kung ganahan sila nimo, di ila kang lingawon, siyempre imo lang paampuon, mapo sila or nahadlok sa imo. Mo nang mutuman sila kung sa ilang ilmong ipahimo sila ha kay para mulayas na ka.
Now, I'm going to ask for the help of Ma'am Ginny and Ma'am Cecil and Ma'am April and anybody else that has taught small children. And if you have anything to suggest or add to what I've just taught, now's the time, and I would appreciate it. If you don't, it's okay.
So akong gihangyo si Ma'am Cecil, si April, o sa pagkanay isto ninyo, tabangan ko ninyo kwa inyong dungagan akong isulti karon kung nakatudlo naman.
Anything at all? Yes.
Years ago, we used to go to a church out in Marysville, California. And the pastor there would tell the children, the workers with the children, the teachers, just get them to say the prayer every week. Sooner or later, it'll take. And, you know, we never agreed with that. We never did that. And just getting children to repeat a prayer is dangerous. And it's wrong. It's unethical. You're going to make somebody think they're saved and they're not saved. Or, you know, it's better just to make sure they thoroughly understand and don't push them, because when they're ready, we just had a little relative get saved back in the States. And he had a head knowledge a long time before he got saved, but he wasn't ready yet. And his grandmother and his mother very wisely waited until he was ready. And when he was ready, he got saved and he understood it. One more time, one other thing was we knew a situation with a little kid, and the mother was very anxious and worried, and she wanted the little girl to get saved, and she wanted her to go to heaven if she died. And she was kind of pushy. And the little girl said to her mom, "When Jesus knocks on my door, I'll let him in." He didn't knock yet. The little girl said that. When he knocks on the door of my heart, I think she said, I'll let him in, but he didn't knock yet.
Wow.
Okay, Binisaya Ma'am Jen. Di ko may tungod niya.
When I was teaching kids in Sunday school,
English, Binisaya?
it's a serious answer.
Binisaya to yung gingon mo. Ikaw interpret. Gan English man ka.
Hindi naman lang.
Alay dahi mo. Binisaya na lang. Pwede rin mo. Gatudo man ito rin. Pag binisaya lang.
Teaching Sunday school.
Sige. Bisaya ka.
Now, Robin said a lot. Do you have anything that you think you need to say?
That's why. It's
Okay,
there.
all right.
So, ito nga Robin, ano kang nakalawas mag-deal ka o sa mga bata, di mo sila kinanglan nga dali-dalion o parang maabot din ang panahon na ang ginoon din ang work sa ilang kasing-kasing. So, kato nang sige lang ipag-umas o prayer. Kung kayo na sa nang delikado na sa pamaanggi nga pagkaluwasan. Sa ako, as I keep sa disco sa mga kabataan, sa ako ang lesson, I always, at sa last part, I always including salvation. But I didn't force the kids to, you need to get saved. But at least every class, they hear about the simple plan of salvation. The time comes, you get saved.
Amen.
Now, there's a danger both ways. I like the girl that said, when Jesus knocks on the door of my heart. But if you grow up in Sunday school, and suppose you go to Christian day school, and you've got a good church, and your mom and dad talk about Jesus all the time, there's a possibility of you growing up thinking that you're a Christian just because you're part of it all.
So, delikado sad, bantayanan sad nga kung nagdako ka Sunday school, nagdako ka o ginikanan nga luwas na Kristiyano, unya na normal na ba ang dagan? Sige nagkakadungog, sige istorya Ginoo, sige istorya hangtod nga murag normal lang sa imo, wa pa mo hindi ka na luwas.
Now, my daughter was 4 when I led her to the Lord. But think of this. Think. Her dad was Gerald Sutek. Her mom was Robin Sutek. Her dad preached 3 and 4 and 5 times a week. She had to listen to that. She is exposed to all of that every day.
Ang akong anak, 4 anyos pa, sa dihang ako siyang gigiyahan diha sa Ginoo. Magina, 4 years old. Kada sa usa ka semana, katulog, 4 siya makadungog nga ako magwali. Mamati gina siya. Ako iyang amahan, Gerald Sutek, iyang inahan si Robin Sutek, mga sikat o mga gwapo-gwapa. So, murag na anad na siya pinaminaw na.
And I told you the story of how I led her to the Lord with the tabernacle, and she knew that. She knew all the answers. She could have passed the test on the tabernacle. And I was preaching one time, and you tell the rest of the story.
She just came to me and she said, it was after the preaching, she said, I want to get saved. Well, she was only 4. We were in a park and all the kids were playing. We had church in the park that day at the pavilion. And I told her, go play. And we'll talk about it later. And I figured she'd forget about it. And she came back in a very few minutes and she said, I want to get saved. I said, okay, let's go talk to Daddy.
So nagsige siya og pamati og nagsisgot ko sa atong tabernacle ug iya na gitong na-master nato niya ba naswito na gid siya hangtod nga usa ka adlaw nagwali ko miduol siya ka ma'am nag-istorya ganina ningon siya nga gusto ko maluwas abi niya dasi gidemanda ning bata ni siguro matulog sige nya kumantaw-taw ding balik. Mingon nga gusto na lagi ko maluwas. Okay, turahan nato imong amahan.
Now, when she came to me and said she wanted to be saved, I said, remember the man way out from the tabernacle? She said, yes, Daddy. And I said, what did he have to do to get right with God? And she brought the whole thing like we've done a dozen times here. And I said, well, you know how to be saved. Why don't you do it? And she did. And that was the end of that.
Unya midul siya nako, unya niingon siya, ang gina nga ngunit siya gusto na siya maluwas siya nga. Nya kabalo na kag unsay buhaton atong sa tabernacle. Di yang gikuha atong tabernacle, yang gipatungod siya. Di yang istorya mo ni mga di yung siya, oh, balo na mo di ka unsaon pagkaluwas, di buhata. Di yang gibuhat. So mo na to, diin, naluwas siya.
Now, the Bible says before you reach the age of accountability, like we're studying, before that time, if you should die, God classifies you, puts you in a category of innocence.
So kung mamatay ka, di naman ka mamatay og tigulang naman mo. Kung ang bata mamatay, so dili pa ang age of accountability, wa pa siya nahibaw-an, di pa siya kabalo sa insakto og maayo, daotan og insakto o baliktad. So ibutang siya sa Ginoo sa age of innocence, dito sa edad nga inosente pa. Na inosente wala ni sala. Dito siya ibutang nga category.
But there's another situation in life that doesn't necessarily involve children. What about a person that does not have the mental capability to understand God, to understand judgment, to understand heaven, to understand hell, and the consequences and guilt of their sin?
So naapoy mga lahi nga sirkumstansya nga dili mga bata kay unsaon lang nato ang kanang dun tigulang na unya naay diferensya sa paghuna-huna o sa pangisip. Nga dili makabalo unsay dautan, unsay maayo, unsay insakto, unsay sayop. So dili nato sila ma-charge ana.
Or suppose they have an accident, a head injury, and they can still live life, but they no longer understand enough sophisticated knowledge to understand God and responsibility of sin.
O pananglitan po, dunay madisgrasya, kunya mapiktuhan ang panguna-huna, kunya dili na dayon siya makabalo kung unsay diferensya og nabay Ginoo sa dautan kana sinted gapon na.
Now there are two verses very important that I want you to know at least the references of them and what the subject is with these two verses. I'm going to explain them.
Dunay tulo ka bersikulo dinhi nga importante kayo nga gusto nako inyong ilista, isulat ang mga references.
Now, Deuteronomy 1:39 here mentions children. So that takes care of children.
So diri sa Deuteronomy 1:39 naghisgot kani og kabataan. So kani nagahisgot sa kabataan ra gyud.
But these other two apply to children also, but they apply to what I describe a person that truly does not have the mental sophistication. I don't know if you have a word like that or not. I try not to use those, but look at these verses. I want you to know the reference for age of accountability. Number one is Romans 4:15. And it says, because the law worketh wrath, watch it, for where no law is, there is no transgression. If a person cannot understand the Ten Commandments, the law of God, and they just don't, you say, is it bad to kill somebody? Maybe they're 30 years old, but they are probably in a mental institution. And you say, is it wrong to kill somebody? And they say, well, I don't know. And it's really true, they don't know. Well, then there's no law. And if they kill somebody, they're not held responsible for that, even by the law of the land.
So naay kaning Romans 4:15 na gahisgot kani sa balaod. Kay kung walay balaod, wala gyud sayop. Walay makasala. So unsaon nimo nang dunay tigulang na idara na o na, pero na dili lagi insakto ang panghuna-una o pangisip. Nyag makapatay siya, wala naman siya kabalo kung sayop pa na o dili. Mao na giingon din na.
Ray has a question. Say it very loud or come up here, one or the other.
What do you think before the Ten Commandments? Because, Moses was the lawgiver. What's the situation with the people that committed sin before the Ten Commandments? Because Moses was the lawgiver.
Very good question.
Unsa kunoy nahitabo atong si Moses may tighatag og balaod, di ba? Naahira man ang Ten Commandments pagkuan ni Moses. Unsa kuno tong mga tao sa wala pa tong kuan? Wala pa naghatag si Moses og balaod. Unsa kunoy lang sala.
That's exactly partly what we're studying now is the concept or the idea of conscience. You know it in your heart. It's stated long before the Ten Commandments were ever issued to Moses, that they knew it in their heart that it was wrong. We all have a conscience.
So mao kanay atong gihisgutan karon nga katong pangutana ni Pastor Ray apil na karon sa atong gihisgutan. Kay mao bitaw nang gihisgutag age of conscience, age of innocence. Diri na siya karon nabilong. Katong gingon ni Pastor Ray nga wala pay balaod, unsaon na lang tong wala pay balaod, ginsan na pagkabalong makasala. Mao na ni.
That is a judgment of God, and I'm glad it's not my judgment. But whether or not a person is either old enough or mentally mature enough to understand the guilt of sin before, during, or after the Ten Commandments, that's a judgment of God.
So mao nay paghukom sa Ginoo. Nalipay ko kay dili ako'y gahukom kundi ang Ginoo. So kung maabot ka sa anang age na diin makabalo na ka sa sayop ug dautan, insakto og maayo, insakto og dili. So paghukom na gina sa Ginoo. Ginoo na mag-determine ana.
Now, we're talking about Genesis 3, and the devil invites Eve to disobey God and eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
So nag-iskot kita sa Genesis 3 nga diin si taning iyang gilingla, giilad, gilimbungan si iba ay tungod sa kahoy. Ito nga diin kung makakaon ka nagahiskot nga makabalo ka sa maayo ug dawtan.
Now, look at this other verse, Romans 5:13. I'm sure it'll be on a test 2 weeks from tonight. List 2 verses that tell us have to do with the age of accountability. The other verse is, for until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. Very similar to the one you read there. Both those verses are proof that before a person fully understands the guilt of sin, they're not held accountable. But like I said to Pastor Ray, that's a judgment of God.
So kaning Romans 5:13 sigurado maapil ni sa test duha ka semana gikan karon. So pangutanon mo duha ka unsa nga bersikulo nga dunay kalambigitan sa age of accountability. So atong usbon tubag ni sa pangutanan ni Pastor Ray nga sa wala pa gihatag ang 10 commandments, ang tao nga dili makahibalo, makadetermine, masayod unsay diferensya sa maayo ug dawtan, dili siya pwede, not accountable siya, meaning dili siya ma-charge. So walay gingon kapag hukom ka na sa Ginoo, pero once nakabalo na ka sa sayop, insakto, dawtan ug maayo, charge na ka na, bilong na ka sa accountability. Napay, there's still a question, Pastor Ray.
No, this is just a supporting clarification. Yeah, so that verse there is for children, for the innocent children. Is that it?
For hard language.
The Romans 4 and 5 is for the aged.
Okay. For those innocent people,
Yeah.
so those verses are for innocent people.
Yeah, those katong laging mo na ang katong sa mga dili makabalog kuan ba? Ang utok ba nga butang nato mga mentally unstable. Children ang ibabaw. Ang kanang duha sa Romans mo nang sa mga dagko na nga walay kuan. Walay saktong pangusok.
I don't know what's going on.
When in the book of Psalms, that's after the law. But it talks about that the heavens declare the glory of God, and that God's made his salvation known. It kind of comes under the subject of what about the heathen?
Yeah.
So, and we know what happens, how it works today, but would that be included in before the law?
Yes, if the conscience condemned, even without the presence of the law, the conscience. The law wasn't, it was like 2,300 years after creation. Yeah. So, something else, Ray? Pastor Ray?
That's all right. Thank you.
Okay. Now, failure, read this here. Failure to act correctly on this responsibility results in damnation. So, just theoretical. A 9-year-old child that knows the consequences of their sin from God, that disobeys and knows it and dies, that 9-year-old child will go to hell.
Yeah.
You say, oh, I don't believe God would do it. Well, you're wrong.
Example, panaitan, ang bata, 9 anyos, nakabalo na sa dautan ug sa maayo, kabalo na nga nay Ginoo. Kung makasala siya, kabalo siya, ana unya mi supak gyapon siya. Kung mamatay siya, impyerno siya. Tapos mingon ka, di ko mo to, 9 anyos, sayop ka. Mao na nay gingon sa Ginoo.
Now, some churches teach this, and some churches just let this happen. What do you mean? Some churches teach that at the age of 12, period, 1, 2, 12, that's the age of accountability. And they try to deal with their children, if they even believe in salvation, they try to deal with their children aiming toward 12. But I know there has been many 12-year-olds that have not reached the age of accountability. They don't understand the principle of God or sin or punishment.
Naay mga kasimbahanan nga gatudlo o na dapat daw ang age of accountability is gaidad og 12. Mao nang ilang gipaningkamutan nga ang bata pagkaabot og 12 kinahanglan nga makabalo gyud sa Ginoo sa dautan. Pero naamang gyud mga bata nga bisag 12 anyos na wa gibot, butang nato wa gibot. Kay di gyud kasabot. Ana.
Satan just didn't mention this to Eve, and he got her to bite. You know, when you look at sin, when I was a child, they advertised beer on television. And they would have this beautiful glass that was shaped, it was a beer glass. And they would sing a beautiful song. Miller High Life, Miller High Life. And while they were doing it, on TV, they would pour from the bottle, and that color of beer would come up, and then the foam would be on the top, and it would have this much foam on top of a glass this big, and then just one little drop would come over and run down. And they showed that, and I saw that when I was 4 and 5 years old.
So gamay pa ko, dunay pasundayag sa telebisyon. Kanang murag advertisement. Nga beer. Miller beer. So dunay nana daw kata sa nga baso, unya sa diyang buan na nila gikan sa botelya sa beer, patpayang idadapat. Ibo-bo, musaka na din ang color sa beer, unya doon na dayo bula nga inana katasa, ibabaw sa baso, pagkapatsada tanawon, unya mo dagay-daday ng isa katulo sa katong bula, unya mukanta dayo no, siya rin kabula itong kanta, di ko kabula ito, kaya wala ito na akong masakit kay Red Horse Beto dire.
You didn't sing.
I don't know that song, sir. I was not born in that time, sir. Never heard of that.
When I saw that commercial, I would always go to my mom and I would tell her I was thirsty. True. That initiated a desire in me for that product. I didn't know how to spell beer. Nobody in my family drink beer. I didn't know nothing about beer. You say it's alcoholic. Blah, 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 blah. I was 4 or 5 or 6 years old. I knew nothing about it. But every time I saw that, I wanted whatever it was.
So sa dihang ako makita na nga advertisement sa TV, uhawon ko. Nga modul ko sa akong mama ug bin ko magi uhaw ko. Walay mo inom nga beer sa among pamilya, wala ko kabalog unsa nang beer, di ko kabalog unsa na, wala ko kabalog ako nakatilaw ana. Pero kung makakita ko ato nga advertisement, gusto ko mainom ato. Uhawon ko.
All right, anything else need to be talked about on the age of accountability?
Doon na ba mo'y pangutana mahitungod sa edad nga sa pagbilisay accountability. Age of accountability. Ay pangutana? Ay.
Okay, we'll take a 10-minute CR break.